Hey everyone, my name is John Karahalis. I'm a computer science student at the Rochester Institute of Technology. I'm focusing on software engineering, psychology, and human-computer interaction in my work, in addition to computer science. And I'm here today to talk to you about my internship at Mozilla. The title of my presentation is MDN Development Process Improvements, Tales of an Engagement Intern Doing Software Engineering. That's obviously a bit tongue-in-cheek, and I'll get to that in a moment. But first, I wanted to thank everyone who made this summer possible. So Jill, who helped make this summer as fun as it was and educational, and the first person I met here at Mountain View. Julie, who helped an excited kid like me join the company of his dreams and who helped him along every step of the way. There's my manager, Jay Patel, who has been so great throughout the entire summer and who has really given me the creative freedom I needed to do my work. There's Stormy Peters, who I was honored to work under, the head of developer engagement. And she really, also gave me the creative freedom I needed and really recognized my passion for free software. And there's also the developer engagement team, the engagement team, and the web development team, and they're all making the web a better place. So I really need to thank everyone at Mozilla, but especially the people I mentioned just now, and they deserve a lot of credit for what they do. So thank you to all of them. But my summer. So what did I do this summer? So this is how I capture it in one sentence. Found problems, offered solutions, and got people excited along the way. Now, on the left you see, if you've ever read The Design of Everyday Things, which is a book on human-computer interaction, this is what they call a Norman door. And if you've never read the book, you can look at this door for 5 seconds and realize what the problem with this door is. And that's exactly the kind of stuff I love doing. So asking why things sometimes need to be so hard, and then actually working to make things better. So I joked in my first slide, engagement intern doing software engineering, but really my work this summer touched 3 different areas: engagement, user research, and software engineering. So engagement. My major campaign this summer with engagement was to encourage creative web developers to submit to the June Dev Derby, which is a site that allows people to compete for prizes while they share their creative work with the world. And to do this, I found people doing interesting work with open web technologies. I found as much information about them as I could, and I started the conversation. So as a result, 11% of the people that I actually contacted contributed to the June Dev Derby. 21% of all contributors from the June Dev Derby actually came from the group that I contacted, and 34% of all demos came from the group that I contacted. And we had really great submissions, including a few that are already famous around Mozilla. So congratulations to all of those contributors. User research. So one of the things I really wanted to do this summer is learn. And I really appreciate what Diane from the user experience team did to help me learn more about user research. So what I did is I conducted interviews with core MDN users, and I outlined takeaways from those interviews in individual Bugzilla tickets that developers could start working on. And I'll get more to that in a minute. But some of the highlights were really interesting. So one of the users started saying, when users start liking articles, we'll do this and that. And I said to myself, that's really interesting because we never even considered that. We never considered users liking articles, but we should have. Another great one was a user said, I've never used the MDN to write a spec before, so this may be a little difficult for me. And that was really interesting because I had no idea that this user was planning to use the MDN that way. Another one, we should really use IRC handles in user profiles because Mozilla uses IRC so heavily. And again, this was a really interesting one because we had thought for a long time about what we wanted in these user profiles, but we never considered this. And we should have, again. So, having that feedback was really helpful. And finally, this one was my favorite. I was burned ever since the MDN went down a couple of years ago. And that was really interesting because I went back to my manager, Jay, and I said, what happened? The site went down a couple of years ago. And he said, I've never heard of that before, right? But this is a legitimate problem. I'm not trying to knock the person who made this comment because really the site did do something to make him think that it was broken, and we really should fix that. So, software engineering. So when I started here at Mozilla, there were many feature discussions around MDN 2.0, but they were spread across many different sites. The Wiki, Etherpad, Google Docs, all over the place. So, I've seen this kind of problem in past work, and when this happens, people don't really remember what they decided in certain features. They duplicate work, and they may forget to actually do work that they promised to stakeholders and to users. So that's a problem. So what I did is I collected all of these thoughts into one comprehensive feature list, and at that point there were really no more questions about it. So if we discussed it, it's in the list. We don't have to worry about it. So the other thing I did this summer is discussions. So there were a lot of great discussions going on around specific features for MDN 2.0, but the problem is developers really can't implement discussions. They need easy, manageable chunks of work. So, developers are busy enough already. The burden of going through these discussions and finding actionable work from those discussions, that burden shouldn't be on the shoulders of the developers, it should be on my shoulders. So what I did is I sort of acted as an interface between all of those discussions and the actual work that developers could do. And so I said to developers, okay, there's a lot of stuff happening out there, but don't worry about that. I'll worry about that. As long as you just complete the work that's assigned to you in Bugzilla, everything will be fine. We had the same problem with user voice, which is a website to allow MDN users to submit feedback for the site. And same problems as discussion, so there was a lot of stuff happening, and developers really can't handle that. There's too much going on. So we also had additional problems with user voice, so contributing needs to be easy for developers and for users. So, for example, developers really love having Bugzilla tickets, but users don't really love filing Bugzilla tickets. It takes time to sign up and get used to the system. So users really love that simple little feedback button that user voice provides on the MDN website. So I tried to balance everything and make it as easy as possible for both of them. So again, I did the same kind of thing. I went through I went through user voice. I went through user voice issues and looked at the things people were talking about and turned those into specific Bugzilla tickets that developers could start working on. And everyone was happy because the users could just hit that simple feedback button and developers had their Bugzilla ticket, so everyone was happy. And then finally, this is really the main stuff that I did this summer. So I was hired especially because I have experience with Scrum, which is a software engineering framework. And this team had never used Scrum before, so I wanted to start out slow. So what I did is I created a product backlog, which is the comprehensive list of features I was talking about earlier. And then I sort of sat down with the development team once every 3 weeks. And I said, okay, let's look at the product backlog, let's look at the high priority items in the backlog, and let's turn those into specific tasks that we can start working on for the next 3 weeks. And so those are what we call sprint backlogs, a list of things that we need to do for the next 3 weeks. And finally, and this is really, I think, the cornerstone of doing Scrum and doing Scrum well, is having retrospective discussions. So giving the development team a chance to sit down and say, okay, what has been working well with Scrum in the past couple of weeks, and what hasn't been working well? So what I hope to do in these next few slides is go through some examples of improvements that I made in response to these retrospective discussions. And I do have a lot of examples, so bear with me, but I think it gives a great overview of the kind of improvements that we were able to make over the summer. So the first feedback I got, and this is even before we started doing these discussions, this one's very meta, right? So someone said, we should start an email thread for discussing changes to our meetings and our processes. Now, of course, that's exactly what a retrospective meeting is. So I started sending out emails. I said, okay, what has been working well? What hasn't been working well? And we discussed for a while. And a couple weeks later, I went back to the team and I got some more feedback. Feedback I got was, I'm glad we're actually making the process better. So that was a real improvement that we made in response to concerns from developers. Another one. I would love if we had a daily stand-up. So a daily stand-up, for those who aren't familiar, is a way for the team to sit down for a short amount of time once a day and just touch base and identify problems. And so I started doing exactly that. I would sit down on IRC and get in touch with everyone once a day. And a couple of weeks back, I went back to the team and got some great feedback, and they said, daily stand-ups are great. They're short, unobtrusive, and I get a daily sync of what everyone is doing. Another one. I lose track of what I actually need to do for a release. Now, this is a real problem, so what I did is, as I discussed earlier, a sprint backlog, which is an actual list of everything that needs to be done for a release. I also broke that down by assignee so that there never needed to be any confusion. There was never, oh, are we doing this for that release? Are we doing that? If it's in the backlog, we're doing it. If it's not in the backlog, we're not doing it. Very simple. The next thing was our releases keep slipping. So same kind of thing. I went to, I wanted to bring the team to a more strict, time-boxed, way of doing things. So I would say, okay, we're going to start on this date, we're going to code freeze on this other date, and that's it. If a feature, is taking more time than usual, we're not going to push the release out for that. We're going to push the feature out. So it was really nice because we had regular feature releases. And because we had this goal, which you can see up here, we had some flexibility to do that. So we could say, okay, this feature's not really getting done, but we're really meeting our higher level goal. So we should be fine. And again, I went back to the team and got some great feedback. We finished with enough time for dedicated QA. By the way, these are all actual quotes. And this person was really excited that we finally had the chance to do this. As a user, it's hard for me to know what you're actually working on. Now this is what I think, again, a critical problem, because you can't, we need to have feedback from users as we do this. We can't just work and work and work and release it and expect that everyone's going to be happy. So I thought really hard about this and tried to create, a really a nice process for submitting feedback. And I shared that with the team, and I sent my process to the team. And I went back to the team again, and I got some great feedback, and they said, this new process sounds fabulous, right? So they were really happy with this. Finally, we are very bad at estimating, so we never really know what work we should do in a given amount of time. Again, this is a big problem, so what I did is I started sitting down with the team and I said, okay, let's look at the items in that product backlog and let's estimate how long each of them will take. And then once every 3 weeks when we sit down to plan, let's take those estimations into account when we plan, and let's take the amount of work that we've done in the past into account when we plan. So, and then I created this spreadsheet which, allows us to look at the work we've done in the past and say, okay, in the past you've completed 27 points, in average you complete maybe 24 points, and so it really gave us a guideline for how much work to do in each of those planning meetings. And I think overall it really worked well. Estimations started getting better. You can see that the average velocity, the speed of development, and last week's velocity are actually very similar because we got very good at estimating. And again, I went back to the team and got some great feedback. I love the point system. I think it gives us a great idea of how much work we're doing, where we're spending our effort, and whether we're on track. So I was really happy to see that we made some positive improvements there. So that was my summer, and again, I wanted to thank everyone at Mozilla for making this possible. If you're interested in continuing this discussion in any way, please feel free to get in touch with me, either by Twitter or by email, and that contact information is listed right there. And otherwise, thanks again.